Since withdrawing from a ceasefire with Hamas in March, Israel has demolished thousands of buildings across Gaza, leveling entire towns and suburbs that were once home to tens of thousands of people in just a few weeks. Satellite images reveal widespread destruction in multiple areas now under what Israel's military command describes as operational control. Much of the damage stems from planned demolitions, targeting both already damaged structures and buildings that appeared largely intact. Verified footage shows massive explosions sending clouds of dust and debris into the air as Israeli forces carry out controlled demolitions on tower blocks, schools, and other infrastructure. Multiple legal experts told Verify that Israel's actions may constitute war crimes under the Geneva Convention, which generally prohibits an occupying power from destroying civilian infrastructure. A spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces (IDF) stated that the military acts in accordance with international law, asserting that Hamas hides military assets within civilian areas and that the destruction of property is only performed when an imperative military necessity is demanded. In July, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, outlined a controversial plan to establish what he called a humanitarian city over the ruins of Rafah, where 600,000 Palestinians would initially be confined. The plan has drawn widespread condemnation. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert told that the idea would likely be interpreted as being akin to a concentration camp. Tel al-Sultan, once one of Rafah's most vibrant neighborhoods, housed Rafah's only specialized maternity hospital and a care center for orphaned and abandoned children. Satellite images showed that, despite earlier heavy bombing and artillery fire, many buildings had survived. But by July 13th, destruction had intensified. Damaged buildings were completely swept away and entire blocks reduced to rubble. Underway in Rafah's adjacent Saudi neighborhood, which previously hosted the city's largest mosque and several schools. One verified video shows an Israeli tank advancing along a street in Rafah while a digger operates beside it. Similar patterns of demolition are visible in other parts of Gaza that had previously avoided heavy bombardment. In Kuzeh, a farming town about 1.5 kilometers (0.9 miles) from the Israeli border, the IDF reported demolishing 1,200 buildings it claimed were part of terror infrastructure operated by Hamas. Before the war, Kuzeh had a population of around 11,000 and was known for crops like tomatoes, wheat, and olives. That a similar story is unfolding in the nearby town of Abasin al-Kabira, which had about 27,000 residents before the war. Satellite photos from May 31st and July 8th show that large parts of the town were wiped out in just 38 days. Israel has also created extensive security zones and corridors dividing parts of Gaza, destroying many buildings along and near these paths. One of the newest corridors separates eastern and western Khan Yunis, affecting areas including Kuzeh and Abasin al-Kabira. Since early in the war, analysts have speculated that Israel is trying to carve out deep buffer zones by demolishing structures near the border. Though some of the areas recently flattened lie deep inside Gaza, and she's on Abu Rashwan, an agricultural settlement about 7 kilometers from the Israeli border, nearly every remaining structure has been demolished since May 17th. Verified footage shows a controlled explosion leveling a cluster of tower blocks. When Verify presented the IDF with a list of specific locations where demolitions have been documented and asked for military justifications, the military did not provide any. Instead, an IDF spokesperson reiterated, as has been widely documented, Hamas and other terrorist organizations conceal military assets in densely populated civilian areas. The IDF identifies and destroys terrorist infrastructure located, among other places, within buildings in these areas. Several human rights lawyers told Verify that the scope and scale of destruction may amount to war crimes. Eitan Diamond, a senior legal expert at the Diakonia International Humanitarian Law Center in Jerusalem, stated that under the Fourth Geneva Convention, which generally governs the conduct of occupying powers, there appeared to be little legal justification for the demolitions. The Geneva Convention, which governs the protection of civilians during wartime, strictly limits when civilian property can be destroyed. International humanitarian law prohibits such controlled destruction of civilian property during armed conflict, except under narrow conditions of absolute military operational necessity, said Mr. Eitan Diamond, a senior legal expert. Destruction of property based on concerns or speculation about possible future use, such as launching future attacks, falls well outside this exception. Professor Janina Dill, co-director of the Oxford Institute for Ethics, Law and Armed Conflict, emphasized that an occupying power must administer a region for the benefit of its population, something she argued is incompatible with a military approach that simply makes the territory uninhabitable and leaves nothing standing. However, some analysts have defended the IDF's campaign. Professor Eitan Shamir, director of the Basis Center for Strategic Studies in Israel and a former official at the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, told Verify that many of the buildings demolished by the IDF had already been heavily damaged by prior shelling and airstrikes. He argued they posed a safety risk to returning civilians, particularly during winter rains when they are more likely to collapse. He also cited tactical concerns, saying, "The area is a combat zone. Even when a building has been entered and cleared by the IDF, once the Israelis exit, terrorists often return to plant bombs or hide inside to shoot at them. There are no signs of a slowdown in the demolitions." Israeli media reported last week that the IDF had received dozens of D9 bulldozers from the United States, despite earlier suspension of the transfer under the Biden administration. Meanwhile, Verify identified dozens of job advertisements posted in Israeli Facebook groups offering demolition work in Gaza. Most of these posts have been shared by recruiters since May and often specify locations such as the Philadelphia Corridor and the Morag Axis, both under IDF control. When contacted by Verify, one contractor responded with hostility. "Go expletive yourself, you, in Gaza." Analysts have offered varying interpretations of the campaign's objectives. Adil Hack of Rutgers Law School suggested the IDF may be trying to establish a security zone for permanent control. Others argue the demolitions may be paving the way for the proposed humanitarian city in Rafah. Ephraim Inbar,